This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the CEO of Hannan Metals, Mr. Michael Hudson. Mike, great to have you on. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Gerardo. Yourself?
I am well. Thank you for asking. Another day, another copper gold porphyry discovery, right? I almost think you are becoming, at least in the market, a victim of your own success. I think most people confuse these discoveries with previous ones, right? And so you recently provided an exploration update on the Belen copper gold porphyry discovery in Peru that you've done some quality work in. Now, the release that you put out here was very technical in nature, so I'm glad to have you on so you can give us non-geologists a primer on the importance of this release.
It was a horrible release, wasn't it?
It was a fantastic release.
It was written absolutely for technical people to understand, and the summary, I apologize, needs to be given more verbally, because it's very hard to write these things without the substance, and it needed the substance. We figured we always try and get the balance right between technical and simplicity, and this time I think we erred on the technical. So what's important here, Gerardo, is simply number one, that we now have validated one porphyry with mapping and observation, and that tells us we've got a kilometre by kilometre porphyry outcropping, leached cap. It's the very top parts of a porphyry. So all that soil sampling, those boulders and rivers, we've now been able to map and understand the distribution in the weathered profile, and goodness knows what could be below there, but a kilometre by kilometre footprint of not only geochemistry at surface, but now all the right geology, the right alteration, the right veining, the right host rocks, the right mineralisation, and the right mineralisation mix is ever so tempting. Number two, we found the hints of a new porphyry about 8 kilometres to the northwest that has a similar scale as the one in the southeast. So the one in the southeast where we've done the more detailed work, we call Ricardo Herrera. The one to the north, the little hints that we're getting with surface geochemistry is called Sortalecchio. And then third, we've just finished a $500,000 airborne magnetic survey, which will unlock this whole area where we've got close to 1,000 square kilometres, and we flew every piece of our land with airborne magnetics. These porphyries are for the most part magnetic. So we'll definitely find more than we know today sticking out of the ground. So it was a really key moment for us to be able to complete that survey in areas that are variably cloudy and foggy, and this is high jungle. So getting helicopters around there and doing it safely and effectively and in a cost-wise manner was very pleasing to have achieved.
I'm going to ask you a very non-technical question. Can we name the next copper gold porphyry discovery the Gerardo del Real copper porphyry? I figure if we can do a Ricardo Herrera, we can do a Gerardo del Real, right?
These are the names of the local villages, so I think you're going to have to have a chat to some of the locals first.
I love it. Listen, there were a couple of things in the release that really stood out to me. The comment about this being the first bona fide bedrock find at the Valiente project, that stood out to me. Can you explain in more detail what that means and why it's so important to you and the team? Because look, again, I'm a biased shareholder, but when I look at the boxes that you mentioned that are being checked off, right? The right geology, the right geochemistry, the right outcropping, the right signature. When I look at all that, that's a lot of things to get right. And that obviously as a shareholder excites me because of the tremendous scale of this basin scale land package that you've been able to amass. And that first mover advantage is clearly starting to show itself. But can you speak a bit more, Mike, to the bona fide bedrock find at Valiente?
Our job as explorers is to de-risk projects Gerardo. So we collect data that's fit for purpose at each stage of exploration. In the earlier stages, you want to sample larger areas and narrow down your search. So we start with stream sediment sampling that samples big catchment areas over hundreds of square kilometres, literally, and then you come down to walking up and down creeks, sampling the boulders in those anomalous catchments. Then you walk up the hills and try and find the outcrops where these boulders have come from. You take soil samples over the areas where you think there's more potential, and then you narrow down soil sampling from hundreds of meters down to tens of meters as you start to pull it together. And then you really try and find a source for all your anomalies, and that was what we've done. This is high jungle, so it's not just sticking out of the ground that you can see from a satellite. It's under thin soils and lots of trees, and we were able to scrape away the soils and start doing that more systematically as we narrowed down the search space. And at Ricardo Herrera, we now have mapped all the right types of ingredients we need to see in a porphyry environment, and we've mapped the porphyry. It's clear, but when you get anomalies, you hope they have context, and the context is that we have an outcropping porphyry. In the leached environment, we don't expect to see very high grades, but we expect to see the metal mix. We expect to see some metals moving around with all the water and oxygen moving them around, and copper's a great example. It's very leached, whereas gold has a habit of staying in those leached environments. And so we're seeing all those right metal movements that we want to see. We expect very significant upgrades when we get below that weathered horizon, and that's why we need to drill. So I received lots of emails from technical people, remembering we just had Tech invest 2.6 million a few weeks ago, have become a 9% shareholder. So of course they've been out and done their due diligence and seen these targets start to develop as we've described them here. So it really rings true in the eyes of people who know what we're looking for. That we're not only we've found one porphyry, but there's hints of 7 of them across this target area, and this is the most advanced one, and now we can map it and see it in outcrop and tell the story ever so more clearly.
Here's another point that was interesting to me. The fact that in 1984, the Peruvian Geological Survey conducted mapping in the central part of the Central Cordillera, right? And there was actually some exploration, though there's not very many records of the exploration that was done by companies like Newcrest, like BHP. So it's clear to me that this region has always been prospective for discoveries, but the security situation at the time, the way that I understand it, Mike, and please correct me if I'm wrong, didn't allow for further exploration. But it is interesting to me that the Newcrest of the world and the BHPs of the world have looked here before. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I suppose we put a little bit of the discovery history in there. So the history is always written by the winners, and we thought it was good to acknowledge some of the past work that had been undertaken here. It's been very sparse. Of course, Peru is not one of those jurisdictions where the government requires companies to hand in the information they collect. So in many countries in which we work, you have to report all your results annually in very detailed technical reports, and it's government own data. They're giving you the right to explore an area, and if you move on, then the government wants to have new companies come in and leverage off that old information. Now Peru doesn't have that system. It just has a pay-by-year policy to keep the mineral concessions active, but it leads to huge gaps and overlap right through the country, and that's a discussion for another day. But we know there was people exploring here in the past. We know that it was pretty sparse work. We know that it was very difficult. The roads weren't existing in the times. It was a big narco area back 20, 25 years ago. But there was hints. and even Ingemet, which is the Peruvian Geological Survey, did map intrusives out in these areas where they weren't really meant to be. Right, this is really rewriting the geology of the Andes, but there was hints there, and then some of the data that Peru Petro put out that they made public a few years ago from all the oil explorers. So actually there is a data set there. I'm incorrect. The oil guys have been very good. The mineral guys have been less so. And that gave us more hints. So there was work, but it was just very tough. And then we were very fortunate, I think, that during COVID, which was very difficult for Peru and others around the world, we were able to sort of take a step back and just put experts into the field, one person specifically, and let him wander around from those early stage discoveries and start putting the puzzle together. And that's what really led to this definition of this belt in much more detail than anyone had ever looked before.
What comes next, Mike? You've been very clear and public about the fact that you only want to continue working and investing in areas where you are welcomed, where Hannan's team is welcomed, and when there is a mutual respect and understanding between stakeholders, the community, the team at Hannan. What comes next?
Absolutely. You can't do otherwise these days. So that is our approach. The next steps are to, one, work up the other porphyry targets to get them into basically drill-ready status. So Ricardo Herrera is clearly drill-ready now. Sortalecchio is, there's a lot of work ongoing there right now. There's a huge porphyry. Between the two porphyry targets, we have a 2.5 kilometre epithermal gold-bearing target that infills between them. So that's just another target that we haven't spoken about. And this is only one porphyry centre. We've got 7 others. So we just talk about Sortalecchio and Ricardo Herrera as one area. So we've got to go to those other 7 areas and do the same de-risking work. At Ricardo Herrera and Sortalecchio, we are starting drill permitting. So we will bring in a whole lot of cultural experts, environmental experts, and archaeological experts, and start doing all that baseline mapping that's required for drill permitting. So that will take a number of months to undertake that work, and then we'll submit our DIA. It's called it's quite the process, and then the Peruvian authorities will take at least a year to approve that. So it's nail-bitingly frustrating, but that's the process we're working with in the country. And while we're waiting for that first drill permit, we'll be working up the other areas, and then over the next 1, 2, 3 years, we'll be drilling multiple porphyries right up and down the spine of this new belt we control.
Fascinating stuff. The upside is ridiculous in my eyes. I will be voting with my checkbook, as I always do. Mr. Hudson, always a pleasure. Anything to add to that?
No, thank you once again, Gerardo, for the opportunity to try and explain what was a very technical release in somewhat simpler terms.
Looking forward to the Gerardo del Real Porphyry Center.
Very good, mate. See you later.
Thanks, Mike. Hey everybody, Gerardo Del Real here. If you're enjoying the content that you just saw, you can let us know in 3 simple steps. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please share across your network and on social media. Take care, everybody.